Hey, what's up, everybody? I am super excited today to review the AFS Ultra Glide 41. I rode this tail pretty much exclusively for the second half of 2025, and it became one of my all-time favorites. So let's go ahead and dig into the data and talk about some of the details and pros and cons of this tail. All right, starting off, we're going to just crank through this data, and I'm going to make some comments along the way. Surface area. 123. This is the smallest tail that I've ever owned where I got significant mileage on it. I've ridden some smaller stuff, but this one, putting in close to 900 miles, was a big deal for me. Key thing that I want to say with that is if you're looking at getting a smaller tail, make sure you've appropriately sized down. If you're riding a 170 and then you think, hey, let's get a 123, I think it's going to feel too small for you. I've had some friends struggle with that. So if you're already riding a 130 and you want to go a little bit lower, this is a really good option for that. Next, aspect ratio 13.7. This is my first ultra high aspect tail. I did ride the HA38, but that's 11.9 aspect ratio if I remember correctly. So this is the first one that was really up there. Span 410, widest tail I've ever had. And then diving into the cord detail, I measure all these details, get the calipers out, check where everything is at. You can read the data right here and check on yours, but this is the shortest cord that I've ever had in a tail. And the really nice thing about this one is that I did not have any issues with pitch stability. When I have a front foil and I go super high aspect ratio on the front, I definitely get a pitchy feel. This one, I feel like it didn't get super pitchy, not on upwind or downwind runs. So that's great. Next, thickness. 4.8 millimeters thick right about here, 3 millimeters thick right about here. You can see this is a thin tail. And this, when I got this tail, this was officially the thinnest tail that I had ever ridden. And I love thin gear. I cannot say enough about how important I think it is to have a thin mast, thin tails, thin front foils. It's something that I think is really, really underrated in foiling. I love it. I can't go back. Now, like for me, if a tail is over 5 millimeters thick, it's hard for me to justify putting it into my foil system. So super thin, absolutely love that about that. I think that if you try this tail, you're gonna like that about it as well. All right, sweep, forward swept. If you don't know what forward swept, this comparison image I made right here is probably the best way to look at it. I drew a line through the center of the Ultra Glide 41, and what you can see here is the meat of the foil is up front, and the center of the tips is pretty much dead in alignment with the center of the foil between the bolts. Up here we have the old HA38, and when we put that same center line through, you can see the meat of the foil is behind that center line, and then the tips are actually all the way out at the trailing edge of the foil. So what happens with that, in my opinion, is this style, this rear swept, is effectively making the fuselage. It makes it feel like you're extending the fuselage that distance. So right here, when we have the tips of the 41 right in the center, that makes it feel like the fuselage has been shortened. So we're going to come back to talking about the HA38 and the 41 as a comparison, but that forward swept design, it makes everything feel a little bit spicier, which I really, really like. Stiffness and flex, 8 out of 10. Really good carbon in here. Distance that I actually tested this for, 897 miles. Had an absolute blast during that time. I tested it with the Enduro 700, 800, 900, Ultra 750, the GLT 1600, and the Silk 1050, and it worked really well with every single one of those foils. Okay, pros and cons, diving in down here. All right, the biggest thing, outstanding glide and low drag. When I was learning to parawing, uh, I tried a lot of different gear. And this tail, the glide was so good and the drag was so low that I stopped using any other tail as soon as I tried this one. So that's why I've got down here, I wrote Parawing weapon. It's just, I tried so much gear and this worked so well with all of my AFS foils that I was, trying the Parawinging with. There was just no way to go back from that. And when I talk about low drag, I think that's a strange concept for us all to try to quantify or put a exact like stamp or label on. But I see my entire I see my flow system as having like a limited amount of drag allocation. You can put you're going to have drag in your system. You have to. That's because you have a foil down there. But where are you allocating that drag? I lean towards wanting it all in the front foil. I don't want any drag in the mast at all. That is, in my opinion, the worst place to have drag. And then the tail, when I can decrease the drag in the tail and maintain functionality, that's ideal. So then I can have whatever front foil I want. And this is the first tail that I felt like, wow, I can really swap out the front, have this tail back there, and it feels like there is barely anything dragging behind and providing that stability. It was still back there. I knew it was still back there, but the low drag and the infinite glide made me invincible with the Parawing, and I really, really like that about this. I can't say enough about that. All right, moving on before I get too overhyped on it. Easy to pump. This doesn't have any kind of magical pumping properties, but I also had no issue pumping it. I think anybody who tries it that's confident in using smaller tails will have no problem. Nice upgrade over the HA38. All right, coming back up here. This tail for me, I struggled with how stiff it felt. If you rode the Silk HA tails, maybe you agree with me that these tails felt a little bit locked in, a little bit stiff. I think that if you use the short fuse, they felt a little bit better. The HA Silk tails felt a little bit better, but I use the regular fuse. I like a more surfy feel to my foiling. So the Ultra Glide, despite it being a larger span at 41, uh, the carving and the surfability is there's no comparison. I think the smaller surface area and the forward swept design that shortens that fuselage effectively makes this tail surf so much better than the HA38 that there's no use for the HA38 any longer. It was a good stepping stone, and then the Ultra Glide 41 completely replaces it. All right. One other big pro for this is forgiving on breaches. Now, I ride the 71 skinny mast, and that mast it has a little bit of flex. If you compare it to the UHM 80 or the skinny 85, those are really stiff masts. And I found that the AFS system breaches tips really well. But when I put that 75 skinny mast in there, which I love, it's a super thin mast with a really short cord. I love that about it. But I don't feel like it breaches tips as well as the other AFS masts. However, when I put this tail into that system, has been magic for stabilizing my tip breaches with the 75. So where I started to kind of lose control, bobble, maybe couldn't recover a breach with the other AFS tails, when I put this on, that was completely remedied and my confidence went sky high yet again. All right, some critiques. If we look down here, it does a lot to make itself a really surfy downwind tail, but it's still not like a radically small narrow span surf tail. So if you're looking for something that can absolutely smash the best of the best turns, that's not going to happen with this tail. This is going to flow really well. You're going to surf and carve and you're going to have tons of style. You're going to be just dripping with style. That's what I think of with this. It's more like smooth carving, kind of showing off, flowing. This isn't like that rage, smash the lip kind of vibe. So I really like it, but it's important to know that that's also not something that you're gonna get. And with that, you know, the Enduro 700 is maybe not uh, the right foil to match with this one. All the other foils, everything that is larger span, I felt like, especially starting at the Silk 1050 at that 916 millimeter span, at that span and higher, so Enduro 800 and larger, Silk 1050 and larger, this is perfect. It still rolls and feels really good. Once you're at the Enduro 700, I start to kind of question, do you really want this tail with the Enduro 700? It just feels a little bit mismatched, a little bit too locked in for the 700. I think that a shorter span, high aspect tail is better with that one. And then some people are scared of it. It's sharp, it's thin. It comes with a sticker on it when you first get it that says, you know, caution, you can cut yourself. If you look at this, you know, there's not a lot there. And if you fall on it, which I don't recommend, it will probably hurt you. Don't do that. Don't fall on your foils at any point in time. It's just better to avoid that. I've never fallen on it, so I try not to think about it too much. Just touched on that best with the Silk 1050 or higher span foils. And then this, real quick, this is just an image showing what, you know, my Parawing has progressed to. So this was my first season, and at the end of the year, I was doing, you know, these 40 and 50 mile Parawing sessions, downwind, upwinds, and this tail unlocked all of that for me. So I absolutely loved it. Now, with that being said, there is one other tail that I want to mention. So in comparison to the H838, this was an awesome next step, awesome upgrade. Highly, highly recommend the Ultra Glide 41. However, there's a new one that just came out, and I want to show you the Ultra Glide 39. So if we look at these and we overlay them, you can see exactly how much of a change you're getting there. And this 39, I've only got a couple sessions on this so far, but I absolutely love it. I really, really do. So I would encourage you, if you are new to ultra high aspect tails, the 41 is the way to go. It's going to be more forgiving for your learning progression. And I think you need time on small tails in order to get your skills up for them. But then once you've spent some time on the 41, this 39, if we scroll down, because I love the data, right? So I'm going to check all this stuff. If we look at the data on the 39, this is now my smallest tail, highest aspect ratio, shortest cord, and thinnest tail that I've ever used. And if you remember with the 41, I mentioned feeling really low drag. This tail, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to overhype it because I'm still new to it, and I want to get 500 miles on it before I really talk about it. This is the first tail I've ever ridden that I felt like nothing was back there. When I put this on, the Enduro 800 and the Silk 1050 are the only two I've ridden it with so far. I slap it on the back and it feels like there's no tail. I'm stable, but there's no drag. It's not low drag. It feels like there's no drag, which is amazing. It is so good. So 41, which is what this whole review is about. This is a really outstanding tail. Can't say enough about it. If you're on the fence and maybe you tried the H838 and it wasn't for you, don't be turned away from this one. This is an awesome tail, and it's going to lead you towards that 39 down the road. So that's all I got for you today. If you have any questions, please drop a comment below. Otherwise, I hope to see you at the river.